Hello. Believe it or not, leprosy still exists today throughout the world and in Mexico. How much do you know about it? How many cases are there? How is it transmitted? What are the symptoms? Can it be treated? What countries have the most cases? This is exactly what I'm going to talk to you about today within the framework of World Leprosy Day. This day has been observed since 1954 on account of the efforts of French journalist Raoul Foulereau, who, when visiting Africa, uncovered the pain of those who were afflicted and not only wrote a book about his 50-year struggle against leprosy, but in addition to establishing a foundation, achieved its designation by the United Nations. The date was chosen as a tribute to Gandhi's contributions on behalf of the infirm, the nearest Sunday to the anniversary of his death on January 30th, 1948. Therefore, World Leprosy Day is celebrated every year on the last Sunday in January. Why am I involved in this matter? Well, because I'm a chaplain of the Military and Hospitaller Order of St. Lazarus of Jerusalem, which was founded over 1,000 years ago and is intent on helping those who, lamentably, suffer from this affliction. That is why we continuously meet with members of the health ministry, physicians, and everyone associated with this issue. We recently met and updated the data thanks to the following individuals. Doctors Marta Angelica Garcia Aviles, Subdirector of Mycobacteriosis of the Leprosy Eradication Program. Iris Estrada Garcia from the Molecular Immunology Lab. Patricia Guadarrama, Irais Lisbeth Rodriguez, and Juan José Salazar. Thanks to them, I can share the most relevant information, not only to support the eradication of the illness, but also to root out every sort of discrimination. Let's take it one step at a time. What is leprosy? It is a disease that affects the skin, peripheral nerves, and bones that can lead to the loss of fingers, ears, or the nose and become disabling, that has horrified those who were ill and the population as a whole since antiquity, which is why persons affected with leprosy were isolated. We can find the most salient examples in the Bible, in addition to the leper colonies of the Middle Ages and up until the 20th century. What causes leprosy? In ancient times, mainly in the Old Testament, it was believed that leprosy was a form of divine punishment. Thankfully, science has made progress, and we now know that it is on account of a bacterium. Research reveals that many millions of years ago, there were two bacteria that separated from tuberculosis, but only one was known up until 12 years ago, Mycobacterium Lepray, which was identified by Hansen in 1873 in Norway. But unfortunately, he couldn't convince other physicians then because he was unable to culture it, nor could he infect rabbits, which was how hypotheses were confirmed at the time. But it was the first bacterium to be identified as causing the disease in humans, and that is very important. In 1879, Hansen sent a tissue sample to Albert Neisser, a German microbiologist, who isolated the bacterium in 1880, and in 1960, Shepard introduced it into the footpad of a white mouse.
Pues hasta ahí iban los avances de la ciencia, pero en el año 2008 se tuvo una sorpresa.
There were no further developments until 2008, when something new came up. Why? More progress. Sadly, 2 homeless Mexican men who had very painful lesions died in the United States. In addition, their wounds were totally distinct from those normally observed in leprosy. That led to further research, and it was discovered that there wasn't just one bacterium that caused leprosy, but in this case there was a second, called Mycobacterium lepromatosis. And it is interesting to note that this is the most common bacterium in Mexico. Let's move on to the next question. How long does it take for the bacterium to incubate? We can't speak of a general rule in this regard because there are cases where the bacterium incubates immediately and produces the disease along with all of its symptoms, while there are other cases where it has taken 20 years for the bacterium to incubate. So, it may depend on each individual, on each case, but there are cases where it cannot be detected due to its incubation period.
Por el tiempo en que tarda la incubación.
How many cases are diagnosed in the world every year? Approximately 200,000 cases are diagnosed worldwide annually. Who can contract leprosy? Initially, it was believed that only humans and chimpanzees, but currently it is thought that armadillos too. That's why eating armadillo meat has also been viewed as a risk factor. And in 2016, it was discovered that Eurasian red squirrels are also an animal reservoir for leprosy bacteria, so they may also cause transmission of the disease.
En, digamos, elementos que contagien esta enfermedad. La siguiente pregunta sería:
The next question would be, how is it transmitted? It is airborne, which is to say when talking, sneezing, within very close contact, but it has also been discovered that it can be through insects. In Malaysia and Indonesia, it has been discovered that it can be through contaminated water or moss. But listen closely. There is greater transmission where there is malnutrition, meaning where there is poverty. And there is another important factor that is genetic. This is to say that there are people with a greater predisposition. People can become infected with a higher or lower quantity of bacilli. Multibacillary leprosy can infect a great number of people, and that is the type there is in Mexico, with 70% of the cases.
De hecho, el 70% de los casos. La siguiente pregunta.
The next question is, how many types of leprosy are there? The known clinical forms are undetermined, tuberculoid, biform, and lepromatose, which is the predominant type in Mexico. Lepromatose leprosy causes what is known as leonine facies. Because facial features become flattened, there is labial hypertrophy. The nose becomes widened, granulomatous nodules called leproma surface, and the eyes seem to turn small, resembling the facies of a lion. But there is also what is called pretty leprosy, because as seen on the right, the skin only looks swollen and shiny. However, diffuse leprosy is severe. The patients are infiltrated by bacteria that can cause a reaction like this one, in addition to great pain and high fever, mainly when they initiate their treatment. Another interesting question, where did the bacteria come from? Molecular and epidemiologic studies state that it most probably originated in Africa and from Egypt, was then spotted in Asia, later on in Europe, and finally arrived to the Americas. Some studies indicate that it was the army of Alexander the Great that carried the disease from Egypt to locations in the Middle East, Europe, and of course, from there, with the arrival of the Spaniards and the Portuguese, it spread to our continent. But look here, different strains of leprosy are present in Mexico due to the waves of migration we have had. There are African, European, and Asian strains.
En asiático. Hay otra pregunta que tiene que ver con que si la persona puede saber si ya se ha contagiado de lepra. Y la verdad es que son muy pocos los síntomas. Pueden aparecer durante unas cuantas
Here's another question related to if an individual can tell if he or she has already contracted leprosy. Truth is, there aren't many symptoms. They can present in a few hours or days in the form of reddish or yellowish stains, which quickly disappear, and that would make a person think it's just a minor skin condition. In other cases, nodules can appear, and the following is very important. There can be a loss of feeling or sensibility. Cases have been described where someone who was smoking could not feel the burn caused by the cigarette's burning point that was already in contact with that individual's fingers. This was how that person and those surrounding him realized that he had contracted leprosy. There are also cases in which patients lose muscle strength. Are there any tests? Because some people might say, I want to know. I suspect I may have leprosy, or that a family member is affected. Is there a test to know if I've got it? Yes. This test is done on the earlobe. So performing a clinical examination and punch biopsies on the earlobes can help determine if someone has leprosy. Early detection is very important in order to find a solution early on. Is there leprosy in all of the world? Let's see.
En todo el mundo, vamos a ver.
This map shows where leprosy is found. The countries that are dark blue are where there are more cases, and the ones that are in white, such as Russia, doesn't mean that there isn't any leprosy, but rather that they have not reported. 33 countries of the Americas have leprosy, mainly Brazil. On a worldwide basis, there are more men who are affected by leprosy than women. In Mexico, 9 states concentrate 76% of the prevalence: Sinaloa, Nayarit, Nuevo León, Jalisco, Colima, Michoacán, Guerrero, Veracruz, and Oaxaca. The 12 states with no incidents are Baja California Sur, Campeche, Coahuila, Mexico City, Durango, the State of Mexico, Hidalgo, Querétaro, Tabasco, Tlaxcala, San Luis Potosí, and Zacatecas. This table shows the increase and reduction from 1989 to 2019. Is leprosy curable? Yes, fortunately, yes. How long does the treatment take? The treatment lasts for a year. Patients are provided, free of any cost whatsoever, with a 1-month stock of pills that are manufactured in Europe. They take 2 of these pills a day for 26 days, and an additional 3 different pills every month. When this time period is over, the person receives oral medication for another month, and so on. This is to say, organizations that support the patients on a worldwide level do not provide the medication for the entire year in advance, but little by little instead. Why? So they can continuously check and see if the patient is taking his or her medication. And there is a way to know that someone is taking the medication. How? The medication makes the patient's skin turn darker, and the physician can immediately determine if they are taking their medication or not. The following question is, when did it start getting cured? Let's look into this. The Mitsuda test was developed in 1919 and was named after Kensuke Mitsuda, who was involved in the creation of this test. It is the reaction produced in the skin by the antigen that is injected intradermally. The Leperman Test works by indicating the patient's immune response. The antigen is a standardized extract of inactivated human leprous tissue. In the early 1940s, Dr. Guy Henry Fadgett and his collaborators began to use sulfone injections to treat the disease in a leprosarium in Carville, Louisiana, in the United States. This group of drugs acts as antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. They inhibit the growth of microorganisms. In 1945, Dr. Robert Greenhill started to study sulfone derivatives and was the first to use dapsone to treat leprosy, establishing the basis for treatments that are still in use. He discovered that oral medication had the same effect as the shots.
Afortunadamente los avances continuaron y en 1953 se llevó a cabo el primer Congreso Internacional de Lepra en Madrid, España, y posteriormente.
Fortunately, progress continued, and in 1953, the first International Congress of Leprosy was held in Madrid, Spain, and there have been various such assemblies since. Thanks to that, in 1982, the World Health Organization recommended the use of polychemotherapy, which is the current treatment. However, the problem is that without a diagnosis, there can be severe damage, lesions and deformations, in addition to social stigma and even death. That is the reason why, within our organization of the Order of St. Lazarus, there are sisters who drive out to ranches to reach out to underserved populations, to find people who woefully are sick, and out of shame or maybe ignorance, don't know what they have, and could also be transmitting the disease to their family members because they frequently live in close quarters. But wonderful things can be achieved with early detection. That is why we need this information to be communicated, to avoid pain and suffering, and to promote early detection. Another problem is that not all medical personnel are trained to detect leprosy. Occasionally, someone might come into a facility and their ailment can be misdiagnosed as some sort of skin or dermatological condition, so that individual will not receive adequate treatment. That is why it is necessary to join efforts with the health ministry and all of the health sector in the nation, and to that effect, our military and hospitaller order of St. Lazarus works mainly out of a clinic in Irapuato. We have another clinic in Morelia. We used to have one in La Barca, although we regrettably had to close it down for security reasons. But thanks to your help, we would like to open up new spaces, new centers, to at least provide information so that people can get the help they need.
Y de esta manera la gente acuda a buscar la ayuda.
I'd now like to invite you to see some of the history of the leprosariums in Mexico, because you might not even know why the San Lázaro subway station is called that way, and other facts. Let's watch this together. Between 1521 and 1524, to avoid the spread, Hernán Cortés had a hospital built for those affected by leprosy on the outskirts of the city, nearby the convent and hospital of the Saints Cosme and Damián and the San Cosme Bartizan. But there was a fountain called Fuente de la Tlaxpana, and many people drew water from that fountain, which was destroyed by Nuño de Guzmán in 1528, claiming that those who were ill drank water from the same aqueduct that supplied the city, so the water was being contaminated. Unfortunately, years later, the aqueduct and this fountain we are viewing also disappeared. So, the second of the hospitals would have to be located in the worst of neighborhoods, to the east of the city, and since St. Lazarus is the patron saint of those with leprosy, not only the hospital, but the entire surrounding area was called San Lázaro. It was in 1572 when Dr. Pedro Lopez, one of the first graduates of the Pontifical University, refounded that hospital with his own money, and it was handled by his family. As of 1721, it was manned by the Brothers Hospitallers of St. John of God. Unfortunately, the Brothers of St. John were expelled in 1820, and although they were allowed to run it once again shortly thereafter, they were definitely removed in 1861, and the hospital of San Lázaro fell into abandonment. In 1862, the patients were taken to the hospital of San Pablo, that later became the Juárez Hospital. But what remained of that hospital? Very few people know that the San Lázaro subway station is called that way on account of the leprosarium, and the icon of the locomotive is because prior to being a subway station, it had been a train station. But these images show the little that remains of the leper colony or leprosarium close to the corner of Calle de Alarcón and Avenida Ferrocarril de Cintura in Colonia Emiliano Zapata. The hospital disappeared as a result of the April 7th, 1845 earthquake, and the church lost its bell tower. The complex was partitioned and sold around 1890. The National Institute of Anthropology and History, INA, states that the construction was declared a historical monument in 1931, but it is abandoned. A portion of what remains was purchased by the Pentecostal Assembly of God, and the plot, where there are lateral parking spaces, by a real estate company. But since the problem of leprosy continued, the participation of a volunteer who had worked at the previous leprosariums was required. In 1939, Dolores Soto, better known as Mother Lolita, organized a demonstration in the main square of Mexico City, the Zócalo, with a number of people affected by leprosy to petition the president at the time, Lázaro Cárdenas, to create a sanatorium specifically for the treatment of leprosy. And thanks to her efforts, the president inaugurated the Dr. Pedro Lopez Hospital on September 11th of that very year. The hospital was named after the 16th century benefactor that we've already discussed. It was located at mile 21.5 of the Mexico-Puebla Federal Highway in the area of Ixtapaluca, on the lands of the expropriated Soquiapa Hacienda. The hospital housed over 800 people. A plot of land was conferred upon each patient to work and have an income, as well as a bed in a shared dormitory with 3 other people. In addition, the complex also had a barber shop, billiards, a store, a casino, football and baseball fields, and even a jail. It was the only official and lawful facility in Mexico for the treatment of leprosy, although there were 6 locations for preventive medicine in the country. Towards the end of the previous century, when it was no longer considered necessary to isolate patients, this place also fell into abandonment.
Actualmente no se necesita separar a la gente que tiene esta enfermedad, pueden recibir su tratamiento.
Currently, there is no need to segregate those who are ill. They can receive their treatment in their homes, following all of the recommendations provided by their physicians. Strict hygiene and transmission will not be an issue. Their family members can comfortably live with them. So if you and I and everyone else does everything within our reach to convey what leprosy is, how it is transmitted, the required good hygiene practices, the help that can be received with free medications, we can contribute to someday eradicating the disease. A disease where people who were hospitalized in the past were confined, living as if they had been imprisoned, because patients were shackled in some of the leper colonies or leprosariums so that they couldn't leave. A deplorable situation, a way of singling people out, making them feel unworthy, despicable and cursed, when all they were was ill, and I firmly believe that this must change. Thank you for your time. Remember, if you liked this video, I'm not an expert in medicine, but I've made my best efforts to divulge some of the facts. But if you liked it, please share it. And if you'd like to receive the rest of my videos automatically, remember, you can subscribe by clicking on the button, and you'll get a notification as soon as they're published. Thank you, and see you in our next video.
Opción para que te lleguen en automático. Gracias y hasta el próximo video.